Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Schmoes Show. I'm Mr. Ryan, and I almost broke out into song there.
And I'm also a schmo.
How you doing, Kyril?
It's been a week.
Hasn't it, though? Grammys tonight. That's going to be fun.
True. That'll be a nice change.
Yeah. Although, snubbed again, like I am every year.
Every time. They don't know true greatness.
Have you ever, actually, read the process for, Grammy noms?
I don't think I have.
So, here's the thing I don't like about the Grammys. There's no incentive for anybody that outside, the zeitgeist to get a nomination. The way it works is that the recording industry, which is basically anybody who's worked on a label and gotten, their names in the credits of a major release, gets to vote on who gets nominations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you see the logic of people who do the major releases in the major music circles being the ones who decide who gets the credit?
No, it sounds fine. There's no conflicts of interest there.
Yeah, absolutely. No conflict of interest whatsoever. And then, of course, they vote again on top of that. So please consider that next time you see Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, or, I'm calling it this year, maybe Sabrina Carpenter do another fucking sweep. Regardless, I'm not mad. Jokes on
Make sure to write down in the history books that I'm not mad.
Jokes on all of those motherfuckers. I own my master recordings.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Y'all want to turn that into commercial jingles? Fuck off. Every time I get this one YouTube ad, it's the toothbrush ad. Do you know that one?
I don't think so.
It's this toothbrush vibrating to the sounds of Bad Guy by Billie Eilish.
Okay.
And it's like, you're watching a toothbrush play Billie Eilish. But did you know you can also listen to the EDM version? And then it plays an EDM cover of Bad Guy. The ska version. And then it plays the ska cover of it. Or the original on the YouTube Music. And I know, Kyril, that you're the bourgeoisie and you pay for YouTube.
I do.
Every time I see that, I always think to myself, God damn, I have artistic credibility for not having a fucking toothbrush play my music.
I will say, as much as I'm a dance and EDM kind of guy, I do find it to, with exceedingly few circumstances or exceptions, that if there's a remix of a song that's already good, the remix is probably worse.
Oh, totally. Most songs nowadays are arranged to be a very specific way. And if you're just arranging just to put it in a different style, you're probably not doing the original song any justice.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to be a very talented arranger to move genres like that. It's very rare.
Yeah, almost without exception, the best examples that I've seen are when someone more heavily samples from a well-known piece of work rather than trying to remix it in its entirety. Yeah. Especially when it's an older thing, because just the pacing and the tempo are just so different to what we're used to today, and it just doesn't work.
I really love a lot of old recordings, though. I blame it a lot on the fact that a lot of old recordings, there's always a drummer, and
yes.
A human can have those micro decisions in a rhythm, and it brings a different kind of flavor than most drum machines or pre-recorded samples can bring. And that's not a boomer music was better in the old days. No, it's just a matter of that's literally just a different language of music right there.
Mm-hmm.
I say this as someone who uses drum machines in my own work. I wish I had a real drummer. If there's any real drummers out there in the world, please let me know.
Yeah, I don't think any exist, unfortunately.
They're just dead. The Fire Nation killed them all.
Yeah, we made the drum machine and all of them stopped to exist. Thanks, Roland.
Was it Roland?
I don't know. They made one of the earliest ones that was accessible. That wasn't like 10 grand and 500 pounds.
You know what's a song that I just found out had like a drum machine on it?
What's that?
Ever heard of the song "Lady Cab Driver" by Prince?
I don't think so.
I highly recommend it. It's like one of my favorite Prince songs.
Okay.
It's it's basically a song about him just seducing a cab driver and fucking. But the drums
That sounds
on
like Prince.
it doesn't it? However, like the way I interpret it is it's like this very buildy song, and I've always loved how it fleshes itself out rhythmically. So I always thought it was Prince on drums. No, it's a fucking drum machine. And that bothered me like at first because I was like, man, it's so nuanced, it's so good. It helps that Prince is an actual fucking drummer, so he could program that thing with a lot more sensibility than I can.
Mm-hmm. I'd have to double check which one it exactly is, but I know I've heard that the particular drum machines that they used in oh god, I can't think of it now. I've lost it. I'll see if I can come up with it later. But there's some spectacular old ones that I think were Yamahas. I want to say like super early Yamahas that were like literally hundreds of pounds just because of how old the technology was. And they're just as a piece of like technology, just seeing that exists is just so damn cool.
I'm a really big fan of like old synth stuff.
Yeah.
Like, too bad it's expensive. It's expensive as hell because like the technology and you can't get it anywhere anymore. But like, I always get a little excited when I see those blocky ass machines.
Yeah. The other side of it though is that reproductions have started to get quite cheap.
Have they?
They're starting to.
Okay.
That was when I was saying about the Yamaha one, because the whole thing with that was that they had taken one of their like original ones and basically made it into like an electric keyboard sized thing with modern technology. Nice. And it was like a few $100 instead of thousands.
I love it. That's cool.
Yeah. I really enjoy synthesizers, and particularly the older ones, because of how close they are to just like turning math into vibes, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, dude, they're like super impressive.
It's so cool.
Have you seen like those old like Moog synthesizers where they had like all those little patch cables and whatnot?
Oh yeah,
dude, those are so cool to me. What was it? I was reading Herbie Hancock's autobiography, and he was talking about like the process of like doing those patch cables and whatnot, and I was like, man, I would break that so fucking fast. Kids, music is supremely cool. And don't let a toothbrush tell you otherwise.
It really is.
Yeah.
It actually ties in nicely. We've commiserated over this, but I had a bit of a frustrating time this week trying to find the name of a track that I was hearing. Actually, I did find it. So, you know, go to hell, Google and YouTube. I don't need your shit. But I was listening to a piece on Formula One for a particular driver who's a rookie in this upcoming season from Brazil. And throughout the piece, there's a bunch of Brazilian songs playing, but at the end, because the guy who made it doesn't speak Portuguese or Spanish for that matter, the song that he plays in the closing credits is Spanish, not Portuguese, and people were giving him shit for it in the comments, and I'm just sitting here like trying to figure out, like, I don't care, I want to know what it's called because it's a good song, and I couldn't find the fucking thing to save my life. And for whatever reason, YouTube didn't want to pick it up in their shitty like content ID stuff, even though I eventually found it on YouTube. So I was trying to like listen to this half obscured song to figure out what the Spanish lyrics are so I can Google them. And in the process of doing that, I came across some weird like Japanese vaporwave jazz playlist that's almost certainly completely AI generated.
Mm.
It's just like, great, this is where we're at. I'm trying to find like actual Latin jazz, and you're serving me AI slop. Love
Dude,
it.
it is bad right now with that AI slop too. Like I don't I don't want to assume half the stuff I see in my recommendations are AI slop because I want to believe there's people who are still putting out work.
Yep.
But like if I'm in a like my playlist and I'm like looking at ready for like my run and whatnot, and there's
Mm-hmm.
something I don't instantly recognize or like know what it is, I'm assuming it's AI and I'm taking it out of the playlist right away.
Yep.
And that's my own defense mechanism at this point.
Yeah. I thankfully have kept in the habit from when I was doing my show, my own piece at Olivet, where I am still just subscribed to like 20 music promotion channels on YouTube. And I still go in as much as I can and sort of curate my own playlists so that I
Good.
don't have to worry about recommendations because it is so, so bad sometimes.
Dude, it really is. Especially in like I'm gonna call out a lot of motherfuckers right now.
Mm-hmm.
Anything with an anime girl in the thumbnail. You know it.
Look,
I know
look,
it.
that's
Yeah.
not true. I know that's not, I know it feels that way, but I know it's not true.
I know it's not 100% true, but oh my god, dude. I'll tell you, I've like I try to
Yeah.
find new music and it's always the shit like not every anime girl thumbnail is AI generated, but all AI
Yes,
generated is got an anime girl in the thumbnail.
sure. I guess what I would draw the line where it like depends on the genre. You know, if it's like actually Japanese stuff and it's got anime girls on it, then I think there's a pretty good breadth of possibilities there. If it's just like random music and it has a random AI or a random anime thumbnail on it, then I agree. It's probably slop.
Yeah, I would say, oh, if it's instrumental, I'm a million times more suspicious, which is
Mm,
sucks. Instrumental guy right here. So
yeah.
like AI is really good at faking instrumental music right now. The lyric stuff harder to necessarily do because like the voice for singing is just not fully there yet. However, that's not stopping them.
I'm curious now. I need to go and check sometime how many music promotion channels I still follow and how many of them are still active.
I'm excited.
I haven't audited in a while, but I've just slowly been collecting my infinity stones of decently reliable music places.
What happens when you get them all?
I don't know. I think I break out the YouTube to MP3 app again and turn off YouTube forever.
I respect that. I want to break free of this hell we call YouTube.
Yeah, it's I don't know a good way to transition into it, but it's been a hell of a week, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, it really has. Like, what a year, man! I'm so glad that it's 2026 next year, in a few
Mm-hmm.
days, because that's how time feels right now.
Mm-hmm. Let me skim through here real quick. I see like where the hell do we even start? I'm gonna save that one. I have a couple of these I'm gonna save for the end so that we have something like good or at least not
Uplifting.
extremely shitty to end on. um I guess, man, it's so hard to follow anything in like chronological order because it just all happens at once. It seems like.
Yeah,
I guess we'll start. I think it's wild to say. I think the big news of this week is being overshadowed by the part where Trump started a trade war with both of our immediate neighbors.
why though? Like, what? I like Mexico. I like Canada.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah. Like we as a country have some really kick-ass neighbors.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Some facts and figures for any Americans listening who don't understand why these tariffs are bad. I have two good ones here, specifically as it relates to U.S. agriculture. Mexico produces just over half of what the entire U.S. produce consumption is. So more than half of our produce that we consume comes from Mexico.
Hell yeah.
90% of the potash fertilizer that is used in America comes from Canada. So we're in this spot now where if you're buying produce from Canada or produce from Mexico, there's explicitly tariffs already for that. And if you're trying to buy the American goods, which is, the idea of tariffs is that it makes domestic products cheaper relative to foreign imports, those are still going to become more expensive because the materials that we need to grow those domestic goods are also more expensive now.
Dude, we are going to eat so much fucking soy in the next few years. Corn and soy.
I don't know. If we can't get the fertilizer, our corn's going to be fucked.
Fair.
It's extremely short-sighted. And this is something that I think is, fascinating to see, is that Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, put out and gave a speech, brief one, before taking some questions on everything yesterday night. It's very good. I highly recommend it. The CPAC YouTube channel has the shortened version of it. It's about 12 minutes, and it starts with a direct message to the American people listening. And if nothing else, I highly recommend listening to that portion of it. But part of that is the announcement of a 25% retaliatory tariff on U.S. goods. This is by Canada, starting on Tuesday. And I think it's fascinating that between that and a similar statement given by the Premier of British Columbia, one of the things that they're specifically going after are additional tariffs on red state liquors. So like Kentucky bourbon, for example.
Damn, dog,
We'll have to
not even
see.
making money. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. But this has given the Trudeau government, and we'll see how it plays out with their voters, but all of Canada is pissed at this, pretty universally, regardless of political ideology. They're not happy. And it's teed up this moment for Trudeau to just step in and be like, yep, we hear you, this sucks, and we're doing something about it. At a time when his government is at the least popular that it has ever been, just as they're coming up on the edge of their election years.
Oh, yeah.
How fascinating would it be if Trump starting this trade war at the time when the Canadian Liberal Center Party is at their weakest causes them to be able to appear strong by doing kind of nothing, and as a result defy the historical odds to remain in power now that they're basically at war?
I truly think... Sorry.
Because it's the difference between, if the Trump administration just has foresight and waits until after the Canadian elections where Trudeau's Lib Party gets completely fucking crushed, then they do this trade war and it doesn't matter. And they have strongly conservative politicians in the Canadian government that they can then work with or whatever. But because they haven't, they might have just completely ruined any chance of having anybody favorable to them in the Canadian government for the entirety of their term.
I truly think this was probably intended as a way to stab at Trudeau's party and just ensure the win. I don't know.
I don't know.
Expect a change, retaliation, tit for tat.
Yeah. Because they're dumb. I mean, that's the end of it, right? That's the whole thing. They're dumb. They aren't thinking things through. And there's a great example of this. God, let me see if I can find it again. We've been seeing with the absolutely flagrantly illegal activity that Elon Musk and his stooges have been doing with the Treasury and all manner of various government agencies and committees by their taking any sort of or giving any sort of orders at all, being these unelected officials, the actual actions are almost a one-to-one with what Elon did when he bought Twitter. As I was pointed out very succinctly, before Elon closed his deal for Twitter in 2022, his team demanded that the company froze all payments to outside contractors and vendors. And that's exactly what the US government is doing. They're trying to turn everything off, see what breaks, and then turn on things as they need to. And that went great for Twitter, as we all know.
I love it.
So yeah, they're just dumb. These are people who are so confident in themselves based on nothing other than the fact that they were born into privilege, and they think it's some sort of birthright of theirs to be in power, that they ignore reality at their own expenses.
Yeah.
Or I say at their own expenses, that part hasn't happened yet because they're so wealthy to start with that they can only fail up.
I've always liked that term, only fail up.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I am personally, and I know you share this, the tariffs by the American government imposed on Canada and Mexico are inexcusable and incredibly disrespectful to people who are our friends and allies, who should be our friends and allies. And I hope that their governments have a longer sight than ours do to weather what should be a brief period of this bullshit to, compared to the scale of the collaboration that our countries have had historically.
I truly think it's going to be a matter of how the next administration works.
I agree.
Yeah.
And we got midterms coming up in 2 years, right? I think that's going to be the full, that'll be as much of a tell for what the rest of the, American government is going to be, right? There's a lot of, what I do think is at this point still doomerism about how there's never going to be another election. I don't think we're going to see that yet. They might try for that at some point, but you have to keep in mind that these are all the worst people for these jobs, both as a matter of morals, but also in the very traditional sense. These are bad workers. They do not work hard. They do not work with passion. They are dumb, they are incompetent, and they are lazy. And they will do the bare minimum that they think they need to do to get the outcomes that they want. And trying to completely subvert democracy, as much as they might hate it, is an activity that's going to require so much more effort than they're willing to do at this point, and fundamentally undermines the position that they are in. If democracy goes away, it removes the social barriers that currently exist to protect the positions that they are in.
I like that way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. The social contract is still a thing. And for many of us, it's clear that these people have already violated it. But that is the kind of line, ending elections, so to speak, that would break that barrier for a lot more people. And beyond that, I don't see any of these people being smart enough to come up with the alternative, right? Like, let's say in this 2 years from now, they don't have elections, or they rig the elections massively to be in their favor somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Then what? I don't think they're smart enough to come up with the next step, or to implement it in a way that works and doesn't stop mass violent revolt.
That's the kind of thing that worries me about their whole administration right now.
Yep.
Because we've seen that Donnie has very impassionate, very impulsive voter bases.
Hmm.
And like he clearly doesn't give a fuck anymore. I think Donnie is at the point where he knows no matter what happens, no more elections for him.
Yeah.
So there's no incentive to please that crowd. And I feel like he's really playing with a live wire here where, we've kind of already seen how angry his voter base can get at him.
Hmm.
Talking about one little Pennsylvanian boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think breaking that contract
People are
as well.
like that is actually a really good point to highlight, is that there are, and one of the biggest failings of outside of policy, I think, and I strongly believe this, the biggest failing of Harris's campaign was not reaching the people who irrationally feel like they have been slighted by Biden's administration, right? People like the guy that took a shot at the president, who are genuinely angry and upset and feel like they're not being heard and feel like Trump gives them a voice someplace. If that stops, they're still angry. They still feel like they don't have a voice and they are running out of options.
Yeah. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. And I'm not talking about the app. I'm just saying it's like, how close are we to midnight again? Like what, 85 seconds?
Yeah, I think it's closer than that, but let me check. The doomsday clock, 89. Okay.
Oh, damn.
I thought it was closer than that.
Regardless, I feel like that's very emblematic of the U.S. as well.
Yeah. In other news, because of course there is other news, and the thing that I was actually alluding to at the start that I think is bigger than the tariffs happening, at least ideologically more important. Trump announced this week that they will be retrofitting Guantanamo Bay in Cuba to be a migrant detention center, and I'm putting that in the biggest air quotes possible, for up to 30,000 individuals. Trump's quoted it saying, quote, "Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back. So we're going to send them out to Guantanamo Bay."
Jesus.
That is not subtext. This is just text of, we have people we don't like and we want to put them in a place where they cannot be in the U.S. anymore and they cannot go home. That is so explicitly a concentration camp.
Yeah. Jesus.
Beyond that, something that is also worth pointing out, at its maximum, Guantanamo Bay housed 780 prisoners. They are talking to expand that to 30,000. Now, how much of this is nothing will remain to be seen. But given the way that it was talked about, it really doesn't seem like this is nothing. How many people actually get sent there? We won't know, frankly. We will only have the word of an inherently unreliable administration that we'll have to trust if they're lying to us or not. But taking this action at all should, and I hope does, cause great unrest to our allies abroad, because the existence of Guantanamo Bay in the first place was already horrendous. Expanding its use by, 15-fold is completely unacceptable and can't be tolerated.
Now, Kyril, I want to just stress one thing for you. We're Americans. It's called an internment camp.
Yes.
I'm just saying, this is...
I mean, so that's the thing, though.
Day.
That's the thing, though. I don't think it will be.
You don't think
the
so?
internment camps that the Japanese were housed in, or that Native Americans were prior into the Trail of Tears, for example, fundamentally, at their onset, were poised as temporary solutions to non-existent problems, right? The Native Americans, we don't want them here, so we're going to put them in this place and then move them somewhere else. With the Japanese, we don't trust them because we're horrible racists, so we're going to put them here until the end of the war and then we'll let them go home. This is not, we're going to put somebody here until a thing happens and then let them go. This is, we think these people need to be in a stateless prison for eternity because they're such violent criminals that they can't be in the US, but they're also such violent criminals that if we send them to another country, they're just going to let them come back again. It's very clearly a notch above what happened before in the way they're talking about it, at least. And what happened before was already atrocious.
Yeah. I see what you mean by the difference there.
Yeah.
Can you refresh my mind, because I don't remember on top of my head. Did they even say like what the stipulation would be to get sent there, other than just be a violent criminal that nobody wants?
Absolutely not. There is no specific qualifiers for this. And I guarantee if anything close to what was proposed goes forward, there will be Americans caught up in this illegally and probably even fatally.
Yeah. The lawsuits are going to be legendary.
What lawsuits? It's not an American prison.
I mean, doesn't it? You're right. Non-American prison.
It's a stateless region. It's technically part of Cuba, but like hell, the Cuban government has the resources to stop this. They've condemned it already, but they can't do anything about it. It also very succinctly sort of answers the question of like, because there's been suspicion basically from the onset of the Trump administration's mass deportation claims of like, okay, how do you do that? Well, you can't. You can't massively deport a bunch of people all at once. It's logistically impossible, and especially so with the ineptitude of the potential of their administration. So you have to put them somewhere. You have to hold on to them someplace so that you can either process them, find out if they're here illegally or not, and I guess at that point, figure out what you're going to do with the people who are here legally that you've just deprived of their rights massively. But assuming you're perfect in that regard, you still have tens, if not hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who you have to do something with. You have to concentrate them in some sort of camp in order to figure out what you're going to do with them next. And the open question was, where do you do that? How can you do that in a way where you're, conceptually going to be inside the borders of the United States as you do that, where people don't see the atrocities that you're perpetuating? Mm-hmm. And they have their answer. You don't do it inside the United States. You do it inside this gray area of no laws applying.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Let's move on from here because there's a lot more to get through. Woo. Very much worth mentioning that part of the just rampant ineptitude of the current administration involved a letter/memo that seems to have been sent to basically every single federal employee in the United States, offering them I think they called it a deferred resignation through September 30th, which would be that these federal employees stop working basically when they choose to within the next few months. If you have a project you want to work on, you can work on it until it's done, or you can just stop working right now. But they get paid through the end of September still. Sounds like a sweet deal, doesn't it? It's actually a very common tool used in private sector workplaces when, you don't have sticky little things like the branches of the government that control different parts of the government to deal with. But the government does. And we'll have to see how this goes. Historically, Congress, because of this silly little thing called the Constitution, controls the budget and where the money goes. Congress hasn't approved this deferred resignation plan in any form. There's a piece put out, a statement put out, to be clear, by Senator Pat Murray, who I believe is one of the chairs, if not the head of the Senate Appropriations Committee, basically corroborating exactly that these deferred resignations would allegedly allow workers to retain all pay and benefits regardless of their daily workload and be exempted from all applicable in-person work requirements through September 30th. And clarifying, there is no guarantee to that extent. Not only is there no funding for that, this is a direct quote, not only is there no funding for that time frame right now, but I personally am deeply skeptical of any offer from a president like Donald Trump, who has so consistently shown he will try to stiff workers if it furthers his personal goals and ambitions. Being given only 9 days to decide is a short amount of time to consider all the financial impacts of potentially accepting the offer, including if and where you'd be able to find a new job, how this would impact benefits like thrift saving plans, and more. And we know scammers often pressure people to act immediately. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this whole thing is, for one, illegal, two, not able to be actually, appropriated. They don't have the money to do this. And the underlying part of it seems like this is almost a way to trick people into voluntarily resigning without having to fire them. You trick them into resigning with the promise of pay that you can't actually give them. So that's bad.
He's just trying to weed out the weaklings.
Yeah. To that end, senior FBI leadership has also been ordered to retire, resign, or be fired by Monday. This is kind of a wild one. The FBI is an overwhelmingly conservative Republican institution. It has legitimately never had a liberal FBI head. They've all been Republicans. Again, this is a wild, illegal act, asking these people to resign or be fired. And one that seems, more so than many of these recently poor decisions, to be one that should, you would imagine at least, be more immediately impactful to the safety of the executive branch. Because that's what the FBI does. They work within the U.S. to stop criminals at the federal level.
Yeah.
Gutting their leadership, and then past that, dozens of individual agents who worked on projects and cases that Trump individually dislikes, seems like the prelude to less oversight on stopping crime from happening. But, who really knows? Who can say?
I think you're just making excuses for the woke FBI.
Yeah, that of those woke institutions.
Yeah. Kyril, I understand that you just think the government can just magically pull money out and just make it into this world. But sometimes you just got to cut back on spending, dude.
I mean, that's not even this, though.
I know.
Sarcasm aside, that's not this. They're not trying to cut spending. They're just telling people that they don't like to stop working, and then leaving vacancies that might be filled eventually, but won't be right away.
Nah, dude, it's always about spending. That's the Republican way.
One of the last pieces of the current administration's stuff that we'll be talking about today before we get on to, the rest of the news, because the world doesn't stop turning. The Pentagon has removed a number of major news outlets from their positions within the Pentagon. This includes NBC, the New York Times, NPR, and Politico. being asked to vacate their workspaces within the Pentagon, and they'll be rotating in. You'll never guess. One America News, the New York Post, Breitbart, and HuffPost.
Why HuffPost?
I don't know.
It feels like that one just doesn't make sense.
Huffington Post doesn't have correspondence. So they've been given a desk that they don't have people to man.
I love our government. So brilliant.
Yeah. They're also just not great.
Oh, I don't like HuffPost.
Yeah. So yeah, that's great. All coming from our wonderful new Secretary of Defense, Peter Hegseth, the most unqualified government official possibly ever, and that includes Trump.
Does that include Reagan?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Damn.
Like Reagan's fucking 5 stars compared to these guys.
Reagan was more effective.
Yeah. He at least had his own ideas, usually.
At least Reagan had a really cool fucking one-liner when the shooter missed him. Does anybody remember the Reagan one-liner? Because that is legitimately funny.
Yep. Last piece that I want to mention on this, a great example of the type of DEI that the Trump administration believes in. There's a great comparison of the requirements for the prior Secretary of Defense. Let me double check real quick. I want to make sure I get his name right. I don't remember it off the top of my head. Oh, does it really not have Wikipedia? You're better than this.
Uh-oh.
Give me 1 second, and I will find this. List of Secretaries of Defense. I believe Lloyd Austin, I want to say. Yeah. Comparison of the accolades of prior Secretaries of Defense, comparing Lloyd Austin to Hegseth. Lloyd Austin, Brigadier Commander, Division Commander, Corps Commander, Multinational Corps Commander, United States Forces Commander, Vice Chief of Staff of Army, United States Central Commander, awarded the Silver Star, 4-star General. Meanwhile, Hegseth was in the Army. You'll never guess which one's black and which one's white.
I don't want to guess because it's too easy.
Yeah. Another piece of news. The USDA Inspector General, who has served in a permanent position since 2002, appointed under Bush W., served under Obama, Trump, and Biden, has been removed from her office while defying the White House's ordering her to vacate her office. Where'd it go? I had her name, and I lost it. Phyllis Fong. So, good to you, ma'am. Stand up for your rights. You know, again, another person illegally fired from their position. Total coincidence that under her leadership, the USDA was investigating Elon Musk's Neuralink startup. Who would have guessed?
It's scary. That's actually very scary.
Mm-hmm. With that, I have some other news. If you'd like to go through it.
I do like other news.
Yeah. We'll go with a little bit of good to start. The EU has ordered Temu, Shein, and Amazon to be liable for unsafe goods sold through their websites.
That's
Good job,
impressive.
EU. You're
Yeah.
doing the bare minimum that I wish my country could.
Laissez faire, my good sir. Laissez faire.
Uh, the Democrats have elected Ken Martin, the Democratic Party leader in Minnesota, as their national plan or their national chair. Sorry. To be clear, this is not a super important. I mean, it's an important position. Like, I don't want to minimize that, but it's not as politically impactful as the title might suggest. Their job is basically fundraising more than anything.
Oh, totally. Nancy Pelosi syndrome.
Yeah. One might argue, given current climates, that the national chair of the Democratic Party might want to change their focus away from, raising money and to focus on literally fucking anything else that's happening right now. But, it's the Democrats, so probably not. Also, again, the fact that they have a leadership position within the Democratic Party and they're not putting AOC there is, again, insulting to the voice that they have within their ranks that they are choosing to ignore. Okay. Piece of news that happened this week, worth mentioning, but not a whole lot to talk about on it at this point while details are still emerging. There was a major aircraft accident at the Reagan International Airport this week. Mm-hmm. A commercial airliner collided with a U.S. military Black Hawk helicopter late hours on, it was Wednesday this last week. It is believed that all 67 people in both aircraft have died as a result. There have been no survivors found, and we're 4 days out now, so it's, basically a sure thing at this point. It is very worthwhile to note that since Reagan, the air traffic control, it's not even an industry, role within the government has been historically understaffed. Reagan gutted it by his inaction, and since then it has been a game of catch-up trying to replace the thousands of people who were highly qualified for those positions. To the Biden administration's credit, they took a good step in 2024 by hiring something like 1,800 more air traffic controllers, meeting their targets for the year. But the positions are still understaffed. And from what we've been able to find in this instant, historically, air traffic control at Reagan was manned by at least two people, one to manage plane traffic and one to manage helicopter traffic. And at this time, they only have a single person doing both. Oh. Whether that is to excuse or explain what happened, we don't know yet. It doesn't seem likely. Based on early reporting, it seems that the helicopter pilot was told to maintain visual, line of sight with the incoming aircraft in order to avoid them. They identified the wrong aircraft in that process and did not see the other plane as it was landing, and as a result ended up in its flight path. Again, we don't know that for sure. There's a lot that's going to have to be uncovered here, but that is the current explanation that seems to make the most sense for how the circumstances played out, given that we do have the conversations between the air traffic control and both aircraft.
Jesus. Okay.
Beyond that, it is worth pointing out that our shitty president used this tragedy as an excuse to continue to rattle on about DEI bullshit, claiming that because the air traffic control space hired, I believe he specifically pointed out amputees and dwarves, people with dwarfism, that was to explain for what happened that night. And when called out on that, asking how that could possibly be the case. He just said it's common sense. So if there was somehow any question as to their motivation for it, that is the end of it. It is hate. These people hate others that are different or less fortunate or a minority to themselves, and the rational reasons behind it do not matter at all. Never mind that, as far as we've been able to tell so far, there was no particular, individual who would have been under their extremely broad DEI lies. It's just people. But didn't stop them from doing it anyways.
Dude, DEI has been a hot topic word for like 10 days, and I'm sick of it already. It doesn't make any sense.
It's very dumb. It's the exact same thing that they did with CRT, where
Yeah.
they take a real term and then they lie about what it means until it doesn't mean anything anymore. And we're at the point where it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's a word that they're using to broadly identify things that they don't like because they don't strictly advantage the straight white male.
Fair.
As a result of Trump's comments, it should not come as a surprise, though for whatever reason, this NPR writer seems to be, somehow uncertain about it as to why this exception would have been made. The U.S. Army released the names of 2 out of the 3 service members who were on board the helicopter that crashed Wednesday. The name of the member who was not released was a female member of the U.S. Army who was on board the helicopter. Reading between the lines, because I don't believe it has been explicitly stated, the family has asked their family member's name to not be released, probably because they're worried about retaliation from the president, who said it was DEI's fault that this happened, and literally every other person was a straight white guy, other than this one woman. Regardless of what her role was, and we don't know, it probably was nothing. It likely was nothing, given that there is an extremely senior warrant officer also on board this flight. Yeah, it's, they're protecting their family from the very clear amount of hate that would be directed to them if their name was released. So good on the Army for not releasing it. I won't be surprised if we get some executive orders coming through here soon to do it anyways, because they only know hate.
What a bizarre administration.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Keeping on moving through them, a bill has been introduced into the House of Representatives to repeal the National Voter Registration Act of 1993.
And
that's it. There's not a whole lot to say beyond that. Very unlikely that anything even close to resembling this actually becomes law, given that the Republicans don't have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. But they're still going to print up their bullshit and try anyways. Got to get those political points. Beyond that, before we get into the couple of good news pieces that there are, it's worth noting a Louisiana grand jury decision this last week to indict a New York doctor for prescribing an abortion pill to a teen in Louisiana. This is almost certainly a case that is going to be appealed up to the Supreme Court, and we will have to see how they handle it, because this should be an extremely clear case of states having the option to control their laws separate from one another. If a prescription is written in New York, there should be no reason for Louisiana to sue them over that prescription.
No, dude, some states just have more state power than other states.
Yeah, all states are equal, except some states are more equal than others.
Yeah, dude.
Not much more to say on this case at this point, but it is well worth being aware of because it's prelude to something that we'll probably be talking about in about 2 years.
Can't wait for that
Final
episode. I'm gonna be so fucking done.
Yeah, just wait. I mean, they're going to try for a national abortion ban. It's just a matter of when, you know.
Yeah.
We had a piece come out this week from Eric Reinhart, a former writer for the LA Times, highlighting the hypocrisy and just general awfulness that the LA Times seems to have become. I wanted to highlight this because it's incredibly disappointing to see the Times of Los Angeles stoop to this point. So I'm going to read through some of their statements that they gave on Blue Sky. Quote, my first and definitely last time working with the LA Times, edited out the most urgent point of an op-ed in the minutes before sending it to press, while then also assigning a title and image that suggest an argument entirely opposite to the author's clear intent is pretty shitty. My proposed title and my opening and closing lines do not leave my stance on RFK Jr. remotely ambiguous. He's dangerously ignorant, egomaniacal, and effectively a mass murderer in waiting. He has no business being anywhere near HHS. So this was an article talking about the nomination of RFK Jr. That was heavily edited to obscure the clearly negative slant that Reinhart intended in their op-ed. It basically makes the piece that was published by the LA Times no longer attributable to them, yet it still is. And you'll know it's a complete coincidence that the executive chairman of the LA Times just happens to have a pinned tweet on his website saying, quote, I had not met Bobby Kennedy until a few months ago. The more I got to know him, the more I truly believed he has America's public interests, best interests at heart. I have worried about toxins and the cause of cancer my entire career. As a physician scientist, I really hope he is concerned. A total coincidence that they then butchered the op-ed of someone being critical of Bobby Kennedy.
Dude, people are just like afraid of like those fascism threats coming to roost.
Yep.
Because like I feel like if this was like 4 years ago, I'm sorry, not even 4 years, 8 years ago. God, we're old.
Yeah.
Like these would have been like big hit pieces, like, you know, because everybody was taking the shit on Donnie. But like now that he's like talking about like institution martial law, if you so much as like sneeze incorrectly at him, it's like, God, people have lost their fucking teeth in the public sector. Like, not really public sector, the commercial sector.
Yeah, in the media in general.
Yeah.
They have all become so commercialized and privatized that they have sold their morals in order to stay profitable.
Yeah.
We get into some good news now, though. I know it's a rare thing, but it does exist. A second U.S. federal judge has issued an order to the Trump administration saying it must pause its attempts to institute a federal spending freeze because it's highly illegal, meaning that there are now 2 temporary restraining orders in place to stop the gutting of our government.
You'd love to see it. The government, making sure the government works.
It's nice, isn't it?
It's surreal.
We'll have to see where these go. Both these cases are likely to be consolidated and appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, where they should have the very easy decision to say Congress has the power of the purse. Nixon tried this shit during his term and was shot down repeatedly for trying to fuck around. Whether the same thing will happen now, who knows? One glimmer of hope that I did see was that the opinion of the Supreme Court, while it's obviously not a positive one, it was pointed out that the court routinely and nearly exclusively rules in ways that afford the court additional power. Judicial power is the ruling over anything else, and expanding it is the only real agenda that the Roberts Court seems to have at the front of its mind. giving, or I guess stripping power from Congress and passing it along to the executive is not something that expands judicial power and could very reasonably be argued to constrain it. So, glimmer of hope that our Supreme Court is so power hungry and fucked up that they'll tell these people to kick rocks. But again, who knows? We'll probably find out in about 2 years.
Loving it.
Okay, real good news. Former New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez has been sentenced to 11 years in prison for being a corrupt piece of shit politician.
Dude, that was actually pretty fast. I thought it'd be a little
They
longer.
did good work. Thankfully, the part where he took gold fucking bars from the Egyptian government made it pretty clear what happened.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things to point out here, highlights from this case. Menendez is insisting that he is innocent of any crimes, repeatedly saying that his interactions with Egyptian officials were normal for the head of the Foreign Relations Committee, that he always put American interests first. He denies taking any bribes and said that the gold bars belonged to his wife, because that makes it better. It's also worth pointing out, in the closing statements and in the media circuits that have followed, Menendez was quoted as saying, "President Trump is right. This process is political and it's corrupted to the core. I hope President Trump cleans up the cesspool and restores the integrity to the system." So he very clearly is, being a lifelong Democrat and liberal senator, he has strong convictions about his morals, clearly.
He saw the light.
And that light is coming from the jail cell that he's going to spend probably the majority of the rest of his life in.
It's going to be so much fun.
Mm-hmm. A judge in Louisiana has rejected a 25-foot buffer zone law for keeping areas clear around police activity, saying that it is unconstitutionally vague. This is a ruling that was brought by a variety of media groups to U.S. District Judge John DeGravels, who issued a preliminary injunction against the law, saying that it is likely that reporters could prove that the law violated their rights by preventing them from news-gathering activities. We'll get to that later. To close out our news, I had a couple pieces that I wanted to mention in just the general zeitgeist that has been going around online. One from AOC talking about just the current state of things. I'm going to read it here. "Yes, this administration is dangerous and cruel, but they are also shockingly dim and incompetent. Opportunities are everywhere. Make everything as hard as possible. Resist every demand. Refuse entry without a warrant. Don't take the buyout. Their problem-solving skills are bad." And a good piece from just a random user that I thought was good, and a recommendation to, on messaging, right? Because messaging is something that the Democrats need to work at so fucking badly. They suck at it. So they're suggesting to no longer use the phrase "do not comply in advance," which they say is bossy, already a cliche, and implies permission to comply later. And instead, substitute it with "fuck you, make me."
Nice.
Lastly, I wanted to close out here with a quote that was being shared around by Dan Savage. "During the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, we buried our friends in the morning, we protested in the afternoon, and we danced all night. The dance kept us in the fight because it was the dance we were fighting for. It didn't look like we were going to win then, and we did. It doesn't feel like we're going to now, but we could. Keep fighting, keep dancing."
I like that. That's really cute.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
From there, in the movies space, I believe we only really have two to go over this week.
What's that?
The big release this weekend is a drama. Is it drama or is it horror? I think it's drama. Where's their genres here? Mystery, thriller, horror, sci-fi, comedy. So it's everything. Great. That's very helpful, Rotten Tomatoes. I'm going to go to another website because you're not being helpful. But the movie's called Companion. It's being reviewed very highly. Currently, 94% from critics, 91% from audiences.
Very cool.
Stars Sophia Thatcher and Jack Quaid as a couple on a weekend getaway with friends at a remote cabin, which unravels into chaos after a revelation that one of their guests is a robot.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. The other big release of this weekend is Dogman from the Captain Underpants guy.
I'm actually excited for this.
It looks very fun. It's being reviewed kind of averagely but positively, which is a pretty good sign for a movie like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kids movie, and I'm not going to pretend like the Captain Underpants guy is fucking Shakespeare.
No, but he makes good kid stuff.
Like, he understands like what it's like to be a kid still, and I appreciate that a lot about him.
An excellent choice of casting for what I believe is the villain of the movie, Petey the Cat. They cast Pete Davidson in the role.
You gotta love it.
So great work there. The synopsis: when a faithful police dog and his human police officer owner are injured together on the job, a harebrained but life-saving surgery fuses the two of them together, and Dogman is born. Dogman is sworn to protect and serve, and fetch, sit, and roll over. As Dogman embraces his new identity and strives to impress his chief, he must stop the pretty evil plots of feline supervillain Petey the Cat. Petey's latest plan is to clone himself, creating the kitten Lil Petey to double his ability to do crime stuff. Things get complicated, though, when Little Petey forges an unexpected bond with Dogman. When Little Petey falls into the clutches of a common enemy, Dogman and Petey reluctantly join forces in an action-packed race against time to rescue the young kitten.
I dig it.
It seems fun.
I like that, based off everything I can tell, because I don't know too much about Dogman, it's pantomime.
Yes.
Pantomime is a very underappreciated art, in my opinion.
Yep. And it makes sense. I do find it funny, though, because like it makes sense. He's a dog. Why would he talk? But then they also just have the cat that just talks.
Yeah. Fuck you.
It's a fun way of like making their own rules and then breaking them immediately.
Of course. I'm a little sad we won't get Captain Underpants 2, but I'm excited for this regardless.
Mm-hmm. I could see this being the kind of thing, though, where if it does well, it would open up the door for that to happen.
Oh, totally.
That's what I have.
Completely fair. I don't have anything myself.
Anything else? Yeah. Highly recommend checking out Deja la Tristeza by El Equipo de Nortes. I spent an hour and a half trying to figure out what the fuck that was called, and it's good. So, yeah.
Don't
now
let
you know.
Tyrell be in vain.
Yeah. Let my loss be your gain.
I'm Schmoes Orion, and I've been a Schmo.
And I'm Cairo, and I've been a Schmo.
And this has been the Two Schmo Show, baby. Keep your nose clean.